Thanks for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. You can find us wherever you find podcasts or listen to music. When you have an opportunity, please give us a 5-star review, write a little note, tell us how we're doing. We really appreciate it. It helps us keep this thing going. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us at Facebook at Hidden Tracks. Instagram is at HiddenTracks99, and if you'd like to send in submissions or talk to us or give us any feedback about what we're doing, our email is myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? I got Josh Garza here from the awesome band Secret Machines. Been around for a while. If you haven't heard of them, you should. And, new album just came out. So, Josh, welcome to the show. Let's dive right into the Moth the Lizard and the Secret Machines.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Josh. Yeah, it's the new album, which has had a long history so far, considering it just came out on Friday.
It's almost 14 years, right, since the inception of trying to make this?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we started tracking, I'm guessing 2009, maybe 2010. I think it's a little hazy on my end as well. Because it wasn't one session; it was like a few sessions, and and then a lot of individual sessions where Brandon, would mess around with it. He had a Pro Tools rig on his computer, so he would mess around with it. So it was just something that was always ongoing. So it was hard to. I remember. I remember when it started, like the initial session. But I don't really. I remember it was Chicago, and it was really cold. So that's my fondest memory of the Moth, the Lizard, and the Secret Machines album.
Yeah, and I mean, from this coming out and from the inception when you started working on it, I mean, there was a bunch of stuff released in between. So this has been like that project that was always, filtering in the background while you were creating other music. And that is, I mean, I would venture to say that not, I'm sure bands have done that before, but this was kind of like a work in progress while you were already creating other work that was fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of times, at least for me, an album isn't finished until everybody's signed off on like the mixes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you start going to mastering. And then at that point, obviously it's official. There was a time like it would probably be late 2010, maybe early 2011. I moved out to LA and we actually were at a point with the album where it was like, okay, we're done with it. We're kind of done with it. It looks like it's finished. We hadn't had it mastered, and then we just sat on it. And then at some point, Brandon was like, "Oh, one of my hard drives died, and we lost a lot of the tracks, or not complete tracks, but like a lot of the overdubs, and I think some of the vocals." So then that kind of cracked it back open. And it just turned into like, well, we'll work on it when we can. And at that point, Brandon was already touring with Interpol. I was living out in LA. So it was hard just to get that momentum again, from where it was, because we were almost kind of done with it. You know what I mean? Like it was just right there. And I don't even know where that version is. But I remember listening to it a lot and just really loving it. And so to a certain extent, what was officially released is very similar to that in terms of vibe. But obviously, I'm sure if I A-B'd it, it would be like two different worlds,
And I like there was, I had read something that Brandon wrote that he, had to learn to be okay with things and how they just are and trying to not make things perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously I can't speak for Brandon, but working with Brandon when we were doing the mixes, it's one thing to be a musician, and to record and to write music. And it's another to be an engineer. And so when you're doing both at the same time, you really, you start kind of like chasing your tail.
Yeah.
Because as an engineer, you hear everything that's wrong. Like, you hear something's off or something's sharp or it's flat or something's behind the beat and what is it, and you can spend hours going thinking it's the drums, but then it's like, oh, it's a bass, the bass is pushing or it's behind. So whatever the case may be, as an engineer, you see it from that. But as a musician, you don't see and hear music like that. So he was having to really find that balance, and so I think what ended up helping that out was me and him getting in a room. I went up to his place in Vermont, and he has a little home studio, and we're just like, let's just bang it out. Let's just do the mixes. Let's just do it. And he was obviously engineering it, but I tried to keep him also balanced. Like, hey, also, we're the Secret Machines. Don't try to quote unquote have everything balanced perfectly, because I think one of the things that I kept throwing at him that kind of brought him back was like, I would always use like the boredoms as an example. Like, hey, what would the boredoms do? And the boredoms would just, they're completely out of whack. Their mixes are really, like, everything they do is like really obvious, and and I don't want to say abrasive, but it's like, they're not tender with their mixes. And so I think that helped Brandon kind of like, come back from the engineering side and kind of be okay with things not being quote unquote perfectly balanced. And plus, I'm just not a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of like Spiritualized and My Bloody Valentine, where, part of the fun of listening to those bands is that, they're not trying to be perfectly pop songs. They're a little wacky, eccentric. There's a tendency to make things longer, quieter, and songs have an intro, songs have an outro. So there's things that I think draw my attention that I felt like really, kind of throwing it at these songs and the Moth songs and the sessions and trying to let them be like, let them live as what they are, which is kind of weird songs and weird music, as opposed to like trying to like shave it and manipulate it and cut it up and try to have it be this format of a regular song that's kind of got a verse chorus kind of approach.
Well, I think that's what makes it stand out. And listening to it is throughout an entire song, throughout 6 minutes of a song, it's almost like you don't know what's coming next, which I think is awesome, because it's not in that style of verse chorus, because it can take you on a completely different path, and it kind of makes the album more spiritualized, to take you on a journey to a point where you can close your eyes and not knowing what's coming next, and it being pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, me and Brandon have always been like into, like when we first got together, and started being in a band in Dallas in the 90s. One of the first concerts we went to was to see Spiritualized. I think it was the Laser, which one is it? Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space album. And Acetone opened up. And during that time period, we were drawn to like a more experimental approach to music and songwriting, but with balancing it with his ability to write a good song. You know what I mean? Because, you know, it's it's kind of hard to balance those two sometimes when you don't have the team. Like if you got a bunch of guys who aren't into like, Pink Floyd, but they love the Beatles, then the music you write will be more closely, rock pop songs. But me and him were just like really diving into like, how can we push it? How can we make something that's 10 minutes long? How can we make that interesting? Because during that same time period, I was, that's when Tortoise Millions Now Living album was out. And that really had a big influence on me, to how can they have a 23-minute song that's really engaging and really pulls you in and takes you on this adventure. And yeah, I granted it's not for everybody, but it was for me, and it was for us as a band. And so, and then when Ben joined the band, it went even off the deep end. We started getting really into Terry Riley, Lamont Young, Steve Reich. We were really just trying to push the envelope of, doing minimal music, but with like a rock setting, which we didn't feel like is usually what happens. Usually bands that are in that world or in that vein don't tend to have a loud bashing drummer like me, so it was actually, to me, I was applying like meditation to like drumming. Like, can I do a beat and breathe into it and just do a beat? Because I remember we did a show at Brownies early on when we moved to New York, where we did one song for 30 minutes and it was one beat. And I think those guys were doing one chord, but it was like there was this whole vibe to it. And so the way I timed it was by breathing. Like after I do 100 breaths, I'll hit a cymbal to let the guys know we're halfway through. And so it was really like we were trying, because at the same time, those are the things we were, kind of like really into at the time. Music, minimalism, dream house, meditation, and trying to put it all together, whereas at the same time, other people were going the other way, with the more 70s rock thing that was going on in New York and during that same time period. So a lot of people were looking at us going, what are you guys doing?
Well, that's what I mean. Like you're saying you're at Brownies doing that. I was like, and that, I grew up that same time that you were playing at Brownies. I think we're probably exactly the same age. So, I mean, I was going to say, how was that received at Brownies at that time that you're doing that? With what, long live Brownies. But when people were changing, I mean, did you find it, because what you guys do, it's kind of like this, this pocket, this atmosphere's pocket of music that it's one of those things for me where you either like it or you don't get it. I don't think anyone will like dislikes that noise and that spiritualized music, but it's you either really like it or people are just at that point where they don't truly understand what a band's trying to do, so they never give it a chance. Do you guys ever like, step back and be like, oh, maybe we need to do something a little bit more, a little bit more polished to get someone to say, hey, check out what these guys are doing, and then they can find that little pocket of what you guys do?
Well, I mean, I think that's what, we've always, to a certain extent, have tried to balance. Like I was saying earlier, as much as we love experimental music and the Boredoms and Tortoise and all that experimental stuff and krautrock, we also love the Beatles, and we love the Stones. So, the balance was from within, like, hey, can we satisfy ourselves? Because, at some point we did realize, we're just not interested in only doing drone rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We felt like, that was limiting ourselves, so it was never like a conscious decision to try to get more fans. It was just actually a conscious decision to satisfy ourselves as musicians, to be like, okay, can we balance our love for T-Rex with our love for krautrock and Brian Eno? And you can, if that's the world you live in as a band. Because we weren't fighting with each other. We weren't like trying, like it wasn't like one of us was like, hey, I want to be more like T-Rex. I want to be more like Terry Riley. It wasn't that. It was more like we all loved that concept, of trying to balance those grooves that we love, from bands and the Kinks. But yet, maybe throw in, a splash of Brian Eno and stuff. And it was initially in New York, and it was always, a lot of people were looking at us going like, "What are you guys doing?" Like, don't you know that ain't cool, or that ain't hip, or that ain't what's going on right now? Especially right at the same time, you're talking Interpol, The Strokes, The Rapture, LCD, and it was just like,
Yeah.
people were like wanting to party, and it's like, yeah, we like to party, we like to dance, but we, you can't be anything that you're not, and I feel like sometimes in bands, the beauty of a band is the chemistry, the camaraderie, the connection that you guys that got the group of guys and gals will have, that when they get together, it creates something unique, and sometimes it's hard to it's hard to find that, you know what I mean? Sometimes you get a lot of bands where it's like, there's maybe one main songwriter and everybody else just kind of like, supports that. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that either. I feel like, if you're lucky enough to have a situation where, you're in a band where everybody's on board with the experimental aspect of life and music, then that can really take you down some paths that you probably wouldn't go down otherwise. You know what I mean? Like, like David Bowie, trying to recreate a new kind of sound and vibe for every album wasn't his attempt to try to gain fans. It was just him trying to satisfy himself, and so that was a big influence as well. Just like, you don't have to be stuck, wherever we were on our first album, we weren't there on our second album, and we weren't there on the third album. And then obviously with the Moth album, we were really somewhere else. And, we wanted to throw out, the go-to way of maybe putting an album together,
Well, I think what's awesome about it is how unique it is, and the story about how it comes together while you're doing all these other things and creating other music at the same time. And I think there's a good blueprint laid down for other bands to maybe follow, not copy, but to follow, of not letting something go, right? Like something that isn't fully polished and fully done, and till it's really done. You know what I mean? And I think that's really cool, is that it wasn't left by the wayside for it to just sit there and always think, maybe we should do something with this. But actually finishing it is, I think, the important part to what you guys did with it, and for it taking as long as it did, and to being okay with things not being okay and not trying to make it perfect, and to sit on it for as long as you did, for it to finally come out, and for someone like me to listen to it and be a fan and be like, fuck, that's just, to me, that's just aspirational for so many different reasons in life. It's kind of a metaphor for life. Like, just because it's not finished when you thought it was, it can always, if you started it, you can always finish it at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I think the funny thing is that a lot of bands have those songs, maybe a B-side or a song from the sessions that they just didn't finish. But to have a whole album,
Yeah.
it is unique, I mean, I think we've all heard about like the deleted My Bloody Valentine albums from the 90s or whatever, like that they did that they weren't happy with, or whatever the case may be. And a part of me is like, man, I'd like to hear that stuff. I mean, I understand why it wasn't released, but I also feel like, as a fan, I'm captivated by the idea of music from a band you like that you haven't heard from an era that you felt like was done, like,
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, why you think, it's, when Zeppelin did the reissues a few years back, it was like, I mean, it was just like 2 or 3 little nuggets of songs that they just didn't finish, but it was awesome to hear that and to be like, wow, these are really cool, because a lot of times, like the Beatles, I mean, I think everything they've done, they released, for the most part. So there's never going to be a surprise from a, long last Beatles. But you would love to hear that. If somebody said, oh, there's this Beatles song that they never released, people would line up, man, and be like, all right, let's check it out. So, I mean, I think it was with this album, it was, I think a part of it, we just couldn't let go because I think what it meant to us as well. Like not just the time we put into it, but we felt like we had touched on something, like inadvertently, because I think in hindsight, like I've read about how, Can recorded some stuff, and I read how Talk Talk did their last couple of experimental albums, and it's like they just played music and then went back and kind of cut out, I mean, they did, what I mean? Like you just edit it together or edit out the parts. You're like, okay, here's a good 7-minute part where we're really grooving.
Yeah.
And bands don't do that, and the reason bands don't do that is because it can be hard. It can be not fun, but if you're in a band that's okay with doing 2 chords for 2 hours at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
in Chicago in the dead of winter, then you're actually onto something. Because then it's like, because it's actually after doing 2 chords back and forth for like 40 minutes that you start getting into this weird zone. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, you're grooving. Are we speeding up? Are we slowing down? And at some point, you're actually just really grooving on something that, is kind of unique. You have to be close as people, as friends, as a band, and be comfortable with that. I've jammed with bands, in the last few years, and it's like, man, nobody wants to do anything longer than 3 minutes. You know what I mean? Nobody, because they're like, okay, end it. I'm like,
Yeah.
we just started. We just getting in the groove. And it's hard. Because it's not. Like I said, it's not for everybody.
No,
But
and when it comes to stuff like that too, is one of the things that I've had a hard thing in my life is one of my favorite bands of all time is exactly that, the band Low, and
Yep.
I can't convince or get anyone else in my circle of friends that can get behind me when I just put it on and want to listen to it. Like, they're like, it's one note for the entire album. Like, how can you be? I'm like, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It brings me somewhere different. And that's what I'm saying, where people are like, they don't dislike it. They're like, I don't get it. And it's so hard for me to sit back and enjoy something so much. And like, it's it's got to be, I think, the hardest pocket of music that I fell in love with, that I've had to try and find other people to join me on the journey of listening to it.
I know. I mean, it's very particular, without
Yeah.
a doubt, to especially the last couple of Low albums that I think I'm with you, man. They're amazing. Um, I mean, they've always been great, but I felt like, maybe 2 albums, 3 albums back, I started noticing that they're getting a little more experimental.
Yeah.
And I was fine with that because I felt like, just like with any other band, you don't want them to keep putting out the same album. I mean, I don't really understand that either. I don't, that's harder in my opinion. You know what I mean? You can't, to put out the best pop rock songs continuously is really hard. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, I always think of Nick Cave's great quote when he's like, man, it's hard enough to write a bad song. You know what I mean? So it's to say, oh, we're going to just, okay, every song is a potential single. Man, that's hard,
Yeah.
and that's why I feel like it's not a cop out to be experimental. It's more like, well, you kind of got to find your place in music, and sometimes it ain't for everybody, right? And I think, and I'm with you, you know what I mean? Some of the music I listen to, man, people are like, what the heck, man? I can't listen to this. I mean, like, and because most people listen to music, they want to hear the pop song, they want to hear a rock
Yeah.
song, they
They
want to
want something
like,
to sing
bam.
along to, or move, feel a little something in their body. And listen, I love that stuff too, but at the same point, it's almost like I need to take my ears to school every so often to know that there are other sounds. You know what I mean? And just listening to other sounds. And I guess that's like what attaches me to jazz so much too, is just all the different instruments and hearing it and just knowing that there's so much more than just that awesome pop song that someone wrote. But at the same time, I can go on a fucking journey and just be like whisked away. And when the album's over, just be like, okay, now I'm back. Like, I don't know where the fuck I was for the last fucking 45 minutes, but it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you just said, a lot of people aren't, interested in doing that, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody's into sports, not everybody's into romance novels. Like everybody can find their little niche and find things that they like. But when you start talking about like drone music and like some weird Lamont Young recording, yeah, then you're starting to like really get very particular, because it
Yeah.
definitely isn't for everybody. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like somebody's got to be doing it. You know what I mean? We can't live in a world where that kind of music can't exist because people can't be bothered to jam on it. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, cool, it's fine. It's not for you, and to a certain extent, that's how we feel about especially Seeking Machines. We've always been this experimental band, but we weren't always off the deep end. You know what I mean? Like, we were always trying to find balance within what we wanted to do in terms of rock and roll. So some people could grasp onto certain songs, and then certain songs, obviously, they'd be like, okay, what the heck is this? This 10-minute song, why? Um, but I feel like, I think it's something that I'm with you. It's like, even not just as a listener, but as a person in a band that does it, it's fun. It's fun to not have these kind of like constraints of like, okay, you have to be done in 3-4 minutes,
Yeah.
five
3 minutes,
tops.
42 seconds. Everything's got to be a 2-4, and we got to just finish this real quick.
Yeah. Now, if you have a song that fits in that, cool. I'm never going to like say otherwise, but I also love the idea of like trying to go somewhere because as a musician, sometimes half the fun is getting lost in the music, and I think that's one of the things that I liked about the Moth album is that you know all, all those songs were us getting lost, and I mean that like we got lost in the music. We were staying up all night doing these grooves, not really even jamming. It was more like just playing music and a couple of chords and ideas and motifs and and then we would overdub, and or Brandon would be like, oh hey, out of that 40-minute excerpt that we did, there's these like 7 minutes that are really special, and we would go back and overdub, and we'd just keep getting lost in that and in overdubbing it. And it was interesting because the Moth was never intended to be like we weren't trying to do songs. We were just trying to do music, sort of like to do a sonic sage of ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
like let's just kind of like get in a room together because a lot of things aren't working in terms of the business side of the band, but that had nothing to do with the music. So you know, when all else fails, every band should just always go back to to playing music. You know, because
It's like it's bathing yourself in sound and seeing what comes of it.
yeah, because that's if you're having problems in a band, chances are it has nothing to do with the music. And sometimes it's best to shut up and just play music as a band, you know, because sometimes talking too much gets you into trouble, you know, you know. So when I was fellas, it's like just you know, let's just do what we're good at, and so that the album kind of represents that. And so it's funny because at the tail end of it, I mean, a lot of the drum beats were near the end of the session, near the end of the sessions, and then even the last thing was vocals. Like I remember there was a time where I was kind of like, I just thought it was going to be instrumentals, like that we're just doing instrumental work. It's, you know, like there was no goal in sight. It was more like we're just doing music for music's sake and we're recording it and we're practicing overdubbing and this whole approach, kind of like and then all of a sudden Brandon's like, I can do vocals. And it was just like, they just took it to this another level. You know, I feel like, you know, in terms of the experimental nature, you know, to have a songwriter say, okay, I'm going to be inspired by the music to the point where it's the last thing that's even thought of, you know, because usually it's the other way around. Somebody has a guitar and a melody and they're like,
Yeah.
hey, here's the essence of the song. And then from there you build on that. This was the complete opposite. So there's something to me, you know, very beautiful about the Moth album because I having it finally be released is a way for me to let it go. Now I can let it be and I can enjoy it without, oh man, let's always kind of like having this like, oh, let's get it out, let's finish it, let's because as a musician, sometimes you kind of like you need it to get out of the way so that you can continue to move on, to move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, it had been there for so long. So now that now that it is out in the atmosphere did you kind of feel that weight lifted off your shoulders the day it released? Like, here we go. Let's kind of take the proverbial monkey off our back and, we did it type of thing. Was it a big celebration or was there a big, release of air when it came to, all right, here's the day, it's out in the world now. We're officially finished.
I mean, it's funny because for me, for me, that happened when we finished the mixes. You know,
All
like
right.
that. You know, it's like a year ago. So I've had a few of these. You know what I mean? Where it's like, all right, you know, we finished the mixes. Like you know, we celebrated, and then we got it mastered. So there was like another little mini celebration, and then a friend of mine, you know, Vanessa Prager, she did the painting, you know. So when I got her to sign on to do it, I was like, that's another celebration. So I had these little victories along the way, and yeah, it culminated in this, you know, Friday when it was released officially. Then it was just like, yes, all these little victories came together, and it's completed, it's done, you know, and I really do feel like a lot of the response has been, you know, been really interesting because I feel like people they get it. I think fans of ours are hearing it for what it is, not for what it isn't. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're not looking for now here's nowhere part two or whatever, or they're you know they're it is what it is. And
Well, I think that's always the scary part, right? Like
oh yeah,
doing something completely, away from this, the standard you set for a band and doing something completely different is always that are, are we going to alienate anyone type of thing.
yeah. At this point, it's like if you feel alienated by us, then it really can't be our fault.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you got to share half the blame on that one. You know, but yeah, I feel like this album is really one of those weird, like, it's not just for us, but I think it's for the idea of a band letting go of what it means to be a band and how what it means to record and write music together. Not to say that you should always do it this way, but I think any band that, gets to that point where they're kind of hitting the artistic wall, I think you got to get in the room and just make music. Don't write songs, don't write an album. Just make music. And I feel like, it's hard to do that. You don't get paid to do that. You know what I mean? Like bands get paid to make albums, so it's like it's hard to say, okay, well, we're going to just do this experimental thing and hope that people were on board with that, because for some reason that just scares people. The bigger the band you are, the more it scares people, because they're like, "What are you doing? You're ruining your career. What are you doing?" And I just think it's ridiculous, because it's like, you know, it, if you end up getting to cooler places sonically than you would if you just stuck to some formula that you're supposed to.
Yeah, and I mean, especially nowadays, like there's no formula to being a successful band. And great man once told me, what's the definition of success is to set a goal and accomplish it. So you can create your own success, right, by doing something like this. You had a goal, and it was just playing music, like playing the song sonically, and then all of a sudden this is what comes about. And that's, at the end of the day, once it's out and done, that ultimate goal is reached, and it's a success regardless of how it's received or how you felt it went. Like, it's just awesome. Like, and that's what I love about the story behind this entire thing, and how it got to where it is, and that it was released last Friday. So I mean, it's awesome, and I just, congratulations to you, man. So
Thanks, man. It seriously is definitely exciting to have it finally out, have people hear it, especially those serious fans who have heard about it, for this longest time. I feel like they'll understand too. If you've been a fan since back in the day, and you've been coming along and hearing about this album, then it'll probably make sense to you. It's like, oh, now I see why they were struggling with this album and why it was difficult to finally come out, because it's not it's not a straightforward album. It's not an
yeah.
easy album. A lot of those songs are excerpts. They're little excerpts from like a 20-minute thing, a 40-minute thing. So it was hard to whittle it down just to like what we felt like was necessary for just the album.
Yeah. Now let's get into your life a little bit. Like, you talked about, finding your place in music, and for me, it was as a small child. For the thousandth time, I'll say it. The first time I heard the Beach Boys, my life changed forever at 6 years old. And I was off to the races with music from that moment on. For you as a kid growing up, what was it that you attached yourself to and brought you into the musical realm, to where you're in your mid to late 40s now, like me, and you're just still at it, still doing it? What was it as a kid that just brought you in and kept you here?
I mean, it's easy. It's my brothers. I had three older brothers, um, and they were older. Like they were 10 years older.
Yeah,
And
my brother's 10 years older, so I was lucky enough to have like that. He gave me all that 70s and all that early
exactly.
80s metal. So yeah.
So I had to imagine having three brothers,
Yeah.
each, and two of them were twin brothers, and then an older brother. And so they would always play music. And I'm talking like, that's where I think I got brainwashed into liking albums, because they would put an album on, and then they would be like, "Hey, flip the record." So I'd be the guy that flips the record, and watching
we always were the little. I'm the youngest, so yeah, I was the automatic record flipper.
exactly. So I just, and we're talking like, these guys, my brothers were just listening to like Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, uh, Bowie. My brothers weren't like cool guys. They're like listening to like obscure Brian Eno stuff. They weren't. But one of our brothers had like David Bowie's Heroes album because he liked the song. And so, but if you listen to the album, it's just kind of, it turns into a weird album. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it was kind of interesting because, like I said, my brothers were straight laced dudes. They weren't trying to. They weren't interested in like obscure music at all. They just really loved Pink Floyd and The Wall, and so growing up, and then obviously they had Beatles albums and all that. So as I was growing up, I think it was probably around, I don't know, I had to have been 5, 6, 7, something like that. And my brothers were like getting ready and they were playing music and they would they had tennis rackets. So like my twin brothers would pick up the tennis rackets acting like they're the bassist and guitarist. And my older brother would act like he's singing the song. And so they had bunk beds. So my brother picked me up, put me on top of the bunk bed behind them, and it was like, okay, you're the drummer. And that's the moment where, like, if somebody's like, when did you become a drummer? It's like that moment right there. Like, I didn't even know I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know anything. I just knew a drummer played the beat, and when you're 5, 6, 7, you're like, that's vague. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I was the drummer. And, I remember even also, and I started getting into drumming. Suddenly I'm like all fascinated by the drummer and the drumming. And I remember one time talking to my brother going, how's he doing this? And I'm trying to do it with my hands. And he's like, he's using his feet. I'm like, and it blew my mind. I'm like, his feet? Like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, he hits it with his foot and this other foot's doing something. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I was just like blown away. And so slowly but surely, I just like thought I was the drummer, even though I'd never played drums, and I think it was probably around junior high when my brothers started saying, "Hey, man, you need to start listening to your own music," in a nice way. They weren't like
Yeah.
they were just saying, "Man, you need to find some bands you like." And sure enough, and that was during the time when MTV was playing videos 24/7, so it would be like, I like that band. And, and my brothers like sometimes would give me a cassette, or whatever, or I would talk my mom into, and this was back when like, getting a cassette once every 2 or 3 weeks was a big deal,
Yeah.
and you had to listen to the cassette because that was it for a while,
Yeah,
and
and that's the album aspect that isn't around today, where you could have bought something because you saw a song on MTV, and now you're forced to like fucking 10 shitty songs too. But they turned into good songs because you were forced to listen to them, which we don't
exactly.
have anymore. You know what I mean? Where people are able to just fucking, I don't like that, and end it. But
I know I'm with you. I think, I think that's what's missing. And I don't, and I don't, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with people to this day because once in a blue moon you'll meet a weird Pink Floyd fan who just knows the hits. You know what I
yeah,
mean? They don't listen to the deep cuts. And I'm just like, oh yeah, they existed. Those people always have existed.
yeah,
So liking albums isn't some thing that only happened always in the 70s and 80s.
yeah, no,
But I'm that guy who nothing's more heartbreaking than liking a song and then checking the album out, and then it's like, it doesn't, it doesn't take you somewhere because that's what you want. I mean, that's what I want. I want to hear a song, and then I dive into the album, and then I'm like, oh my god, this is a great album, because that's how I grew up, and obviously not everybody grows up the same
yeah,
way, So most people usually, I think, grow up listening to the radio. There's the hits, and you can live your life like that and not, I don't feel like you're missing out on anything, but I was always one of those guys where it's like, I remember talking my brothers into getting me like the Clash Combat Rock album. And to this day, I think it's a great album. I think it's better than London Calling. No, but to me, I got into it when I was really young, and I was going to have to wait 3 weeks to get another cassette. So, well, let's go, man. Combat
yeah,
Rock, let's go. And I love that album. But the album, the thing is that when I got into the Clash, I didn't know I was getting into this genre of underground music or underground rock. You know what I mean? But it turned into the gateway band for me, because from there it would be like, oh, if you like the Clash, you like the Sex Pistols, if you like the Misfits, and oh, hey, have you heard Husker Du and the
yeah,
Replacements, and you know what I mean? Like that's when I started going down that path. Then
yeah,
other friends of mine were more new wavers, but they like Love and Rockets,
yeah.
and where they came from, oh, they're from Bauhaus, and you know what I mean. So like it just started growing from that. And so by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was listening to like obscure stuff. I got lucky, and I always want to talk about this because it was a dear friend of mine named Larry. I have been able to find him. I lost track of this guy. I lost contact with him. But this guy, when he was, when, I think I was a freshman. Freshman just ended. It was the summer before sophomore year in high school, and this guy moved into my neighborhood, and his mom spoke Spanish. My mom spoke Spanish, so obviously they were going to be friends, because there's only two people probably in the neighborhood that spoke Spanish. And she was like, "Oh, she's got a son. You guys should hang." And so this guy had a record, Tangerine Dream, Rubicon.
Oh,
He had Rubicon, and I was like, I'd never even heard of the band. That changed my life. I That summer, that's all we listened to. And then he got Ummagumma, Pink Floyd Ummagumma, and I'm just like, Pink Floyd Ummagumma and Tangerine Dream Rubicon was my soundtrack right before my sophomore year in high school. And I always look back and I'm like, man, kids these days, they're not listening to anything remotely that far out, man, when they're going into their sophomore year in high school. And so I got lucky, and I've always felt lucky. I had brothers who were listening to cool music. I had this guy who moved into my neighborhood who, like, we were best friends, and he turned me on to Tangerine Dream, and to the point where I remember I saw Tangerine Dream in '87 in Dallas do, like, this show. And at the time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go see Tangerine Dream. They're playing, and it was a free show, which is weird. I mean, which was great for me. But now in hindsight, I
yeah.
was like, wonder why that was free. And so it's like I saw Tangerine Dream in the '80s, man. And I, like, at the time, it was no big deal. I remember I had to have my cousin take me because I was too young. And I remember him going, man, what the heck is this? I'm just like, oh, it's Tangerine Dream. He's like, man, all right, like he was just like, man, all right, whatever. But because he was bummed that he had to, like, kind of like, be my babysitter, but I was loving it. And I just remember now I look back and I just, like, I can't believe that happened. That was cool. I mean, I got lucky, and so I mean that so my childhood, I feel like obviously had a big impact on the music and the bands that I listened to, and my brothers were supportive. I had one of my brothers was always like, man, go for it. When I, in the '90s, when I ended up moving to New York, he was like, go, I'll help you out, and I remember he paid for the U-Haul, and we all split town, and it was good to have that, so, but it was weird because when I was in high school, I didn't know that you could study music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I didn't know. I knew you could be in band, but I knew that band wasn't what I liked. Like, I knew that much, but I didn't know that you could study it, like learn the instrument and then go to college and study that. Um, Not that I would change my life for that, but, my parents didn't know. I mean, my parents, all they knew was like, oh, you're going to be a doctor or an engineer or what, a lawyer, because that's what you're supposed to say to your kids.
Yeah.
And you don't tell your kid, yeah, you be a drummer, because you're like, they see it more like, Pee Wee soccer, like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just fun. You're having fun, right? Good. Okay, now go do your homework. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that is also, looking into some things like that is, I also didn't know that music could be a thing because when you grow up and you have like music class or whatever, it's in high school, it's the band and it's, compositions. And when you're in grade school, it's just trying to figure out an instrument. And nowadays there's all these things like the School of Rock and all these types
Yeah.
of things where kids can be in bands at fucking 10 years old
Yep.
and learn the way for a band to get together and learn how it's supposed to be cohesive and do these types of things. And I think that's, that's fucking awesome. And I'm excited to see what comes of that and what musicianship we get in the next like 10, 15 years from these kids who are 10 years old and playing in bars. Like my wife's coworkers' kids, one's the drummer, one's a guitarist. And we went to see him at a bar that we usually just go drink at. And like, they're fucking 12 years old. And it's like, this is fucking cool. I'm excited for the future that there's stuff like this. Cause when I grew up, there was nothing like that. And it was just band, like, and then you were a band fucking geek, right? If you,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you were part of it. So
No, I'm with you 100% on that. I think, it's funny, you say the whole School of Rock. I mean, my daughter is 5 and she's got School of Rock band practice today after pre-K. And I'm with you, it's like, I want her to see it as a viable outlet,
Yeah.
for her. And I'm also trying to influence her. I'm the guy who, I'm playing stuff that I like always, and obviously I can't be playing, you know, too much of the weird stuff because, at that point she's just like, Dad, what is this? But, I do, I try to influence her, like, because sometimes, I'll always lean on, Echo and the Bunnymen, some maybe, London Calling, The Clash, some music that's like, it's still rock, it's still
Yeah.
straightforward, but it's left of center, if you will,
Yes. Yeah.
um, because I remember that was the big struggle when I was younger. It was just like, I remember in high school somebody saying, because I liked the Butthole Surfers in high school, and I
I did
remember,
too.
I remember being called out like, you just like stuff because it's weird and different. And and I remember going, no, I like it because it's good. I like the Butthole Surfers because they're good, and and I like Fugazi because they're good. I don't like them because I'm trying to take the piss out of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to annoy you that I like this weird music, and and I mean, I remember in the '80s, I appreciated Michael Jackson. I mean, who didn't? I remember, I'm not the biggest Michael Jackson fan, but you couldn't miss it. It was the biggest thing since sliced bread. And I remember loving Thriller. Remember that video that John
Yeah.
Landis directed? It was just like that wasn't even pop music anymore. It was just like theater and seeing
Yeah.
a movie. And
That's exactly what it was. It was a movie. It was a 7-minute long movie that you got to look forward to every day
and I
on
remember,
MTV.
yeah, and you would just be like, that was awesome. So I think at a young age, I had to, I remember balancing the idea of like, I don't like, you know, I don't like pop music, but I can appreciate it, and I can see how it's easier to play Michael Jackson at a wedding reception than it is playing the Misfits or something, And it's like you have to be able to be okay with that, and not be anti it, but I can be like, I choose not to play that because I don't want to hear it. I would rather hear, MC5 or the Stooges as opposed to, Madonna. And that's no diss on them. I think Madonna, anybody who's having any success, power to the people, you know,
Yeah.
power to the people. You did it, get in where you fit in. But, I can honestly say not everything is my cup of tea. You know what I'm saying? And say that in a way that's still respectful, because I think a lot of people are are going to take things the wrong way, and, oh, you said they suck, and no, I don't, I don't,
Uh,
no, I just, this ain't my cup of tea, and
yeah.
would rather
That's
listen to
what
something else.
my comments usually listen, man. Hey, you like it? That's awesome, man. I don't have to because there's enough people that already do. That my opinion doesn't matter on the
I
count.
know.
They got they're getting 20 million fucking album sales. It doesn't matter if I'm not a fan. Like it
No,
doesn't fucking matter.
no, you won't miss me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Tortoise. I'm gonna go see Tortoise. They're actually playing uh tomorrow night. Yeah, tomorrow night here in LA, and I
Nice.
haven't seen them since the '90s. And like a part of me bought tickets early on because I'm like, man, yeah, heck yeah, I got, let's support the troops here, man, because it's like they're playing a small club. Let's go. They'll miss me if I don't go there. I feel like
Yeah.
they'll be like, man, where's Josh? Whereas
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is selling out Cowboy Stadium 3 nights in a row, and I'm like, isn't that 100,000 people each night? It's like, man,
Yeah.
you guys won't miss me
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. And that's what I love, and that's why I love little shows. And last week I went to see the band The Weeks in New York City and at the Mercury Lounge, and
Right
at
on.
at some point I'm like, man, fucking Mercury Lounge is sold out, but it's still so small. But it is, if that one person wasn't there, it wasn't a sellout and they would be missed. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
if you're doing that show at MSG, like no one's
Nobody
gonna
cares.
notice. Yeah.
Nobody cares, man. And that's the thing, and I'm not opposed to that. You know what I mean? Like I'll go see, I saw Roger Waters a few years back, at a stadium do the wall, and it was like, heck yeah, man, I'll be there. So I'm not, what I mean? I'm trying not to be anti-establishment, but I'm also trying to say, look, you don't always have to eat McDonald's. You know, I
No.
love McDonald's, but you can also check out some weird, obscure food and try different things. And you might go
You can
down
have the
some dead
best
ends.
hamburger joint connected to a fucking gas station somewhere, like, and check that out too.
Yeah, I think you you should try to do other things, and that's why I feel like with music, I think you grow up just listening to the radio and the hits and the music being picked for you, and that's fine too, because some people just don't care, and but I do, I care, and nothing's more exciting than like actually turning on the radio and being like, whoa, what was that, and being like, wow, that's kind of cool, and it's hard. It's getting less and less because music is just getting really, 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 really like pop oriented, and they're not leaving a lot of room for experiment, kind of sonic experimentation, and not just weird music, but just something that's just different than what everything else is going on. But you can still find it. You just have to try a little bit, and that's why I feel like with this new album that we did, it's like, look, yeah, I get it. It ain't for everybody, but at the same time, it kind of is for everybody. It's like, it's just music. It's not, weird. It's not so weird that it would be like you don't know what to do with it.
Well, listen, man, it is for everyone because it's sonically there's something there for everyone. There truly is, and people just need to appreciate it and find it is what it is about the album that'll connect them to it. And I think that's, kind of at the point now where we are in the day and age of music where people are putting together a song just to make a playlist or fall in somewhere. What I love about this is there is something on here for everyone, but you just got to listen to it to find it for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what, that's what I hope we get across here today is that, hey man, you may not think it's your cup of tea, but sit down with it and listen to it. And at the end of the day, it's your choice, but give everything a chance. And that's really what it comes down to with music nowadays. And it is so hard to find shit. And that's why we do what we do here is to find stuff that we think is important enough that someone's not going to take the hours of searching the internet to find because they're already tied into a playlist that pops up automatically for them. So,
yeah. And it's hard. I mean, I'll read The Quietus. You familiar with The Quietus?
yeah.
So I'll see their top 100 albums, and I will check them all out just to find that one album. You know what I mean? That I'm like, whoa, this is really cool.
Yeah.
But most people won't do that,
Listen, that stuff too, like Bandcamp, when they'll put out the top 50 albums of last month, like I'll go haven't heard of 90% of them, but I'll go through every single one just to find the one album that I didn't know I was looking for a month. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what's awesome about it.
Yeah. Or even like, I have a friend, man, he like recently, he was like, hey, have you heard the new Young Fathers? And I was like, it's not, it's not my bag. I remember the first few albums, it wasn't my thing. And he's like, check it out. And sure enough, man, it's like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
The recent Young Fathers is probably one of my favorite albums of the year. And, and I think that's the thing is that because I've already kind of written them off as a band that wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you have to, that's the thing, guys like you and me, we have no problem saying, yeah, we still don't like those first two albums, but this third album is pretty good, and a lot of people aren't like that. People make choices and they're like, it's like they have a team they're rooting for or a team that they're not rooting for. And once they've made that decision, they feel like they have to, kind of like stay in their lane. And I think music can be something that's like, it's fluid a little more, it changes, man. Like, a band that you probably didn't like 10 years ago. Well, maybe you were somewhere else, as a person. And now maybe you might be into it, but people don't, like I said, people don't care to
people don't take that. No, people don't take that time. And I think that's what, I've tried to express here many times. And me being a Jersey boy, when you're born, you're kind of handed a Springsteen fucking CD. And it was just never for me. Right. Like, I'm like, it's not for me. But when I got into my 40s and then I read his book and then I start listening to some of his music, I'm like, all right, well, yeah, because he was writing from a 40-year-old's perspective and I was 8 years old. So yeah, I didn't fucking get it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, all right, I can actually, at least appreciate it. I still don't like I'm never just going to go throw on a Bruce fucking thing. But now I get it and I appreciate it. But I think that's where bands also kind of get shit on too, because people go back to the day where like, oh, this new album doesn't sound anything like the stuff I fell in love with. Well, it's because they're not the same fucking band and they're not the same fucking people. They're allowed to grow up and mature and age, and things change in everyone's life. Experiences dictate basically everything that bands do, right? So it's all off of experience. So their experiences are completely different than they were when they were fucking 22 to when they're 42. So it's allowed to be fucking different, and don't shit on them because of it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, you get it. You're going to think any band's latest album is not going to be good. It just seems like that's the general consensus. And, and I, I always go back to Beethoven and like, man, his Ninth Symphony was his big one, his best, over the top. And it's like, he kept it going. And I just feel like with rock and roll, I think the same can be true, but you do have to be a little open to it. You have to be okay with the fact that, things do change. And not every band is going to be able to maintain that vibe that they've always had, but I feel like they should be allowed to continue to do whatever the heck they want. I mean, that's what we want from our artists, right? We want the artists, the bands that we like to keep pushing the envelope. And then you realize, well, not every band is meant to push that envelope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's different. That's a different conversation. You know what I mean? Like if you want to talk to me about how about Taylor Swift isn't as good as older Taylor Swift, well, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about the latest Tortoise album or versus the first album, then it's like we can have a conversation there because the certain music gets the benefit of the doubt. And I think, when you talk about experimental music, obviously it gets the benefit of the doubt, right? Because it's like that's the whole point. But then when you blur the lines, like with the Moth album, where it's like, well, it's not wholeheartedly experimental music. It isn't like noise. There's still songs there. There's still melodies and vibes, and so what does that mean? And it's like it means that it's like if you're open to it, you might dig it. That's all.
Yeah.
And I think it rocks to a certain extent. We're still able. Can you experiment and not turn the drums down? Which is a hard thing to do. You know what I mean? When you start talking about Brian Eno and experimentation and what you can do with that, the first thing to go is the drums. You know what I mean? So
those get turned down a lot.
Yeah. So we did the opposite. We were like, let's let the drums still be what they've always been in Secret Machines. And can we, experiment around that? Not because we're trying to make a point, but because it's, that's one of the things about Secret Machines is that like the whole point of it is that each band member gets their life and their vibe exposed. You know what I mean? And part of Secret Machines is Josh Garza, and then part of Josh Garza is loud, abrasive drummer, and who still loves Nick Drake. So there's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on, but it's like you have to like try to do that, and a lot of bands, like they feel like they have to conform or do something, and it's like, no, I mean, I get it. You probably have a label and management telling you, man, if you do whatever, you're going to ruin your career, and it's like it's a harder discussion. That's why you'll probably never get a weird experimental album from Bruce Springsteen, but he doesn't have to do it.
No, yeah. Well, right? It doesn't matter because I mean, even if he did one, it really wouldn't it's not going to ruin his fucking career.
No, in fact, we probably love it, man. We probably be like, whoa, man, the boss.
I need something like that to be okay. But I think that's where some bands get afforded that opportunity, right? Like I think a band that I always turn to that was able to experiment because they hit so fast was Radiohead.
Yeah.
Where they were, they were able to just like throw shit on a wall and see what, stayed there because they hit and they were afforded that opportunity to do so. Where other bands, never quite had that opportunity to hit that big and be able to just say, okay, well, now we're just going to do the craziest shit in the fucking world.
Right. Yeah.
And see if you're still going to hang around for us.
Yeah. Because most bands, if you were to do that, would be like, okay, what are you doing? You know what I mean? That I agree with you. I think it's special that, Like even with the Smile album that came out, which the part that breaks my heart is that it's like, well, I wish Radiohead would have just done it, it so that experimental music hits more of the masses,
Yeah.
because I do think it's something to be said about experimental music going above ground, not underground. You know what I mean? And like Pink Floyd, they're one of the biggest bands in the world, made at the same time the weirdest album. The Wall is a messed up album that was hugely popular. So that's what I wanted Radiohead to do, is to keep pushing that envelope. So a part of me is like, man, I wish you guys would have, I mean, I don't think they broke up, but I just wish they would have continued that, instead of calling it the Smile. And I like the Smile. I saw them in LA, and I thought it was one of the best shows I'd seen in a while. And it was experimental to a certain extent. And I was like, right on, and I do want that from my big artists. You know what I mean? I want them to let the masses know that, hey, man, just because you're being experimental doesn't mean it's unlistenable. You know what I mean?
Give me something to think about. Like that. That's what I like. Like, give me something to think about now. I'm good with that stuff, but I know you're uber talented, and we've seen ways that you started to do something, but just now fucking go completely batshit crazy and give me something to think about.
Yeah, exactly.
But listen, man, we hit an hour real fast here. This is this has been pretty awesome, and I don't want your daughter to miss School Rock, because I don't want to miss the next fucking Taylor Swift coming up, and like that's important to me. It really is important that these kids are doing that, and then you have that for her. That's pretty fucking dope. Like,
yeah, I'm excited about that.
That's awesome, man. Before I get you out of here, we're going to end into our ending segment, which is our weekly threes. So I don't know if you got to pull something up, or if you're like me, I usually have it right at the top of my head. But 3 things you're listening to that you'd like people to check out right now.
Sure. Like I was saying earlier, I think the new Young Fathers album is great. Let's see, what have I been listening to? Dang. I'm kind of going through my stuff, and it's like, man, I'm just listening to old stuff.
No, that's fine, man. And yeah, it doesn't have to be new. Just whatever you're listening to. I like to hear what someone's been jamming on lately. So
I've been listening to My Bloody Valentine. I guess that the most recent album, the Young Fathers' most recent album. Oh, and Lil Yachty. I really like the new Lil Yachty album. It's kind of like psychedelic R&B. Those are probably my top 3 right now.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, if anybody hasn't heard those albums, man, obviously you've heard My Bloody Valentine, but
yeah,
the other 2, man, you should check.
No, Young Fathers is the new one's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's good. And have you checked out the Lil Yachty album?
No, I haven't. I just wrote it down, so I will be checking it out.
Yeah, check it out. It's you'll be pleasantly surprised. I tell you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, here's my 3 for this week. First one is a band called Principles. The name of the album is Blame It on the Weather. I guess I would just call it quiet boy hardcore music. Next is Billy Howerdale. If anybody knows who that is, co-founder of Perfect Circle, put out an album last year called What Normal Was. Really fucking good. Really glad to see that he's getting a little bit of the forefront on this as well. And last but not least is another band who's popular at one point, but I think they're still creating some fucking amazing music. The Afghan Wigs, How Do You Burn? Their last album that came out last year is awesome, and they just did an amazing cover of a Police song. So go check that out. But Josh, this was awesome, man. Thanks for spending some time with us. I look forward to hopefully doing this again with you. I know we can fill an hour very easily talking about music, but this was pretty fucking awesome. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you, man. It's been great talking, and good luck with everything.
I appreciate it. Good luck with the album. I hope it hits as hard as it should to everybody that listens to it. So I thoroughly love it, so I know someone else out there will, and that's what we're doing here. We'll get you one more person to love it, and then we'll go from there. But Thanks again for everything you do. Thanks for putting your soul on the line, your heart on the line, and all your musical integrity to putting it out there for people to listen to, pick apart, and choose. And that's why we love artists like you, because you give it your all. And we just thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts. So thank you. Everybody, you know what time it is. It's time to go out, listen to Secret Machines, and have a great fucking time. Thanks again for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at HiddenTracks99. Also, send all your submissions myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Tune in next week. You may find your new favorite band, and don't forget to go out and have a great fucking time.